5 Live Formula One.
Good afternoon and welcome along to live coverage of the Belgian Grand Prix weekend ahead of the 12th race this season and the last before Formula One's summer break. And because it is a sprint weekend, we are just about to head into qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix. Saturday then consists of the sprint shootout. That's qualifying for the sprint before the sprint race later in the afternoon. A reduced amount of laps, less points on offer and no mandatory pit stop. Sunday, business as usual with Grand Prix qualifying. Now, it is rather wet and rainy in Belgium at the moment, and it was very wet for free practice 1 earlier. The only practice session our drivers get with limited running, but there was some running. But as the cloud cover began to sink lower and lower, visibility reduced. On top of that, with the spray that's being kicked off the back of these Formula One cars in the hills of the Ardennes countryside, the conditions getting trickier and trickier. And ahead of qualifying, sad to report that it's been delayed by 10 minutes. So we're going to have a bit of chat before we get into qualifying. Don't you worry. Here's how the championship order looks, though. Max Verstappen leads with 281 points. That's 110 gap to Sergio Perez in second. Then it's Fernando Alonso, who's a further 32 points back from Perez. Hamilton, Russell, the top 5. Sainz, Leclerc, Norris in an improved McLaren now, climbing up the ranks up into 8 ahead of Stroll, and Ocon rounds out the top 10 in the team's standings. It's Red Bull who lead the way. Could they win every single race of the season? Well, right now they're looking pretty good for it. 452 points at the top. That's 229 clear of second place Mercedes, and it really is this battle for second in the teams right now between Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, McLaren, the top 5. Then it's Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri. All our teams getting off the board with points, but certainly getting tighter and tighter in that midfield pack. Guiding you through all of the coverage this afternoon for qualifying is myself, Harry Benjamin, and alongside me is the former McLaren F1 team mechanic Mark Priestley. Mark, very wet for practice, wet still for qualifying, although it looks like at least it has stopped actively raining.
It has. It's quite a difficult one to read, as it always is at this particular circuit. It's in a sort of strange part, the Ardennes forest in the middle of Belgium, where it's such a hilly terrain, where there's almost this sort of microclimate that can come in at any moment. So it can be raining 1 second, a minute later it can be bone dry, and you can even get that at different parts of this very long 7-kilometre long racetrack. So difficult one to read. But in this morning's practice session, it was very, very wet. We had limited running. There were a number of drivers that never even completed a timed lap, including Max Verstappen. So when they come out of the garage and do their first timed lap in qualifying this afternoon, for some of them it will actually be the very first time they go into turn 1, having only left the pit lane and come back into the pit lane at the other end, missing out that first sector. So interesting and treacherous, and they'll be tiptoeing around first time, I thought.
Yeah, those drivers you mentioned include Logan Sargent and the Williams, who actually crashed out and brought out a red flag during FP1. Lance Stroll's Aston Martin, the 2 Alpines of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, and Max Verstappen in the Red Bull as well. So perhaps slightly on the back foot. We should also say that Verstappen does head into qualifying with a 5-place grid penalty for going over his gearbox allocation. So no matter where he qualifies, he will be dropping back 5 places come race day. There was a bit of talk about what happens if we don't get qualifying underway, if it's too wet. Well, the FIA have planned for that, and we will run the grid in championship order. The 5-place grid penalty would still apply for Verstappen, though. But despite the start of qualifying being delayed, it does still look like we should get a qualifying session underway. It's not exactly a monsoon out there.
No, conditions right now, and that's the big caveat, because as I said, it can change in a heartbeat. Conditions right now look pretty close to being, certainly on the side of the circuit that we can see, up by the pit lane, the hill going down towards Eau Rouge. They look like they're okay. Still wet, of course, but okay. I think just to pick up on that 5-second grid penalty for Max Verstappen fans, don't be too concerned about this. It's a strategic decision to take that extra gearbox, knowing that having had a few niggles with gearboxes over the early part of the season, they're probably, or almost certainly, going to need more than the 4 that you're allowed in the regulations, and therefore they've strategically chosen this race to take the extra one, knowing that a 5-place grid penalty is going to have a minimal effect. Given the nature of the circuit, it suits their car. It's very high speed, which their car is very, very good at those parts of the lap. And it's a circuit where you can overtake. So even if he were to qualify first in the afternoon session, starting from 6th on the grid, I would say that with the pace he's got, there's not too much challenge in finding his way back to the front.
No, and he started well down the grid this time last year as well, due to grid penalties galore, and still came through to take the win. So don't fret, Max Verstappen fans. And this really is a home race for Max Verstappen, never mind the Netherlands being his home race. He was born in Hasselt, which is less than 100 kilometres from Spa. So very much a home race, but the crowd are happy and on their feet. They are lining on the grassy mounds that surround this Spa-Francorchamps circuit and lining up into the grandstands as well as the drivers begin to get belted in. 10-minute delay though before we get started for qualifying, which I think gives us, Mark, a little bit of time to just go through some of the big news that dropped just pretty much as we went off air for free practice 1, which was around Alpine. So Otmar Zafnauer, the team principal, and Alan Permain, the sporting director, are both out. They are both leaving the team after this Belgian Grand Prix. Although they are still in Belgium working with the team, Alpine have decided that they are not on the same timeline as the rest of the Alpine management in terms of where they see Alpine moving up through the field. And it's not been a good start for Alpine this year. They said they needed to consolidate fourth and move closer to the top 3. They've gone backwards. Yeah,
it's not been a good start. And actually, when you think about it, I mean, Otmar Zafnauer, he's had a troubled time to some extent leading that outfit. If you remember back to the whole debacle around Oscar Piastri's contract and that whole mess that played out very publicly with him leaving, even though they'd already announced him as a driver. Oscar now, of course, at McLaren. Otmar presided over that. So whether he was directly to blame or not, that's come under his leadership. And I think together with that and the results that have happened on track, it's just not been good enough. When you're talking about a team, it's a manufacturer team. They've got all the money that they need to make this happen. They've got the people, the facilities in place, and yet they haven't started seeing that progression. Like you said, they haven't progressed towards the eventual outcome they want. So the strange one for me is why they've announced it now, in the middle of a weekend, seemingly quite abruptly, when the two people involved have still got to remain here over the weekend facing questions from the media and still do their job. Why not wait till the weekend's over and announce it, or it might be swept under the carpet in the summer break?
Well, that's a very good point. Let's bring in the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Andrew, I mean, this was a breaking story straight after practice. What's the reaction been like where you are?
Well, I think there's sort of widespread shock, not so much at the decision themselves, particularly not about Otmar Zafnauer, although Alan Permain, I'll come on to in a minute, is a slightly different topic, but more about what appears to be complete disarray at Alpine. They've not... Let's rewind a little bit. Laurent Rossi, the chief executive officer, has also been moved aside into what they call, quote, special projects. A couple of weeks ago, it was announced that a guy called Bruno Famin, who was the head of the Alpine/Renault engine division, was being promoted into a newly created role as head of Alpine Motorsport, and Rossi was gone. And now they've announced that the Famin's announced that they've got they're going to completely restructure the team, but they don't know how yet. He's going to decide on that over the next few weeks. He's going to act as team principal, and he's going to do it while employing no team principal apart from himself, and losing a sporting director who's been at the same team for 34 years. And it was a bit embarrassing, actually. There was a press conference between practice and qualifying, and Famin was in it with Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal. And Horner was talking about Alan Permain, who works very closely with Jonathan Wheatley, the Red Bull sporting director, and all the other sporting directors on all sorts of rules matters in Formula 1. He described Permain's 3+ decades at what they call in Formula 1 the Enston team, which was Benetton and then Renault and then Lotus and then Renault again and now Alpine, as a truly remarkable achievement. And he added, and Famin was sitting sort of just along from him, he's been one of the mainstays of that period and been there through the championship years with Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. He's a hugely competent guy. I doubt he's going to be unemployed for too long.
Andrew, it clearly seems to have come out a little bit of a surprise to just onlookers watching this, but the other move that's gone on as well is Pat Fry, the Williams, the chief technical officer, who's now going to Williams. Is this a completely separate move, or is his hand being forced as well, do you think?
No, this is separate. So I've just been speaking to James Vowles along with the rest of the media. Basically, we're all crammed into the Williams motorhome here in Belgium. And Vowles was making the point that his decision to recruit Fry came some months ago. In fact, Fry, he said, was the first person he contacted when he joined Williams, even before he joined Williams, actually, in January, because he didn't officially become team principal until February. He said he got in touch with Pat Fry and said, "You're the guy I want to be my new chief technical officer because I think you've got all the right qualities." The move wasn't decided on then. He said Fry wanted to stay at Alpine for the time being, but he said that as things developed at Alpine over the first part of the season, and I'm sorry if you can hear some background noise, by the way, they're playing the driver radio over the PA here in the media centre. He said that Fry decided he wanted to leave Alpine, and he said we could make our own conclusions about when that was, and what I guessed from that was that he was referring to the Miami Grand Prix when Laurent Rossi, the former CEO of Alpine, basically laid into the whole Alpine team on two different media outlets. I think at that point Fry probably decided enough was enough. Vowles appointed Fry because he saw what a good job he did turning around McLaren, who were in a terrible state when he joined them in 2018, or rejoined them in 2018, I should say, because Pat Fry's been in Formula 1 for a long, long time and was originally at McLaren, then went to Ferrari while Fernando Alonso was there for a while in the early 2010s, and then he left McLaren and did the same job turning around Alpine. And Vowles believes that Fry embodies all the qualities that they need there at Williams. And I think Mark would know a bit about Pat Fry because he was working with Mark at McLaren when they were together there during the Hamilton-Alonso era.
Yeah, he's a really clever guy. He's really level-headed, is what I would say. Very calm and measured, even in the face of absolute chaos when you're in the midst of a real bun fight. He's a level, calm head amongst the lot, which is exactly what you need as an engineering type. And I think in terms of leading people, which is what he will be doing in this new role at Williams, he's the perfect person to spread calm amongst an engineering office. And that, I think, is what somebody like Williams will need moving forward, where they're building towards the success that they've been craving for a long time. I think Pat's a really good place, a good person to anchor that process. So, yeah, I wish him well.
So a good signing then from Williams, but just to underline what Andrew said there with the Alpine news, it just does seem like it's chaos in the management side of things. And we were having this chat off air, Mark, weren't we? You know, things at Alpine and whatever guys they've been, Renault before that, of course, go back to Benetton, you know, Lotus, it's never been clean cut for them. There's always been trouble, issues, getting involved in things they didn't need to be getting involved in.
It feels like it's been a chaotic history from a management perspective, doesn't it? Whether it's controversy over contracts, whether it's technical controversy. If you go back all this way back to Lotus, we had the Crashgate saga with Flavio Briatore and the management at that time, and there seems to be a whole long list of things like that. And I'm not saying they're all related in any way. It's a very different team to the one that existed back then. But what we've seen play out over the last few months really does look like chaos. And this announcement today, and as I said before, the timing of that announcement, the clear seemingly like distrust that's come about between Alpine management and management of the team, or the lack of faith, just feels like it's more of the same. So I mean, I hope for the sake of everybody there who must be working incredibly hard behind the scenes to try and get this working. Everybody will be hoping to get the best out of this car and out of this team. For all of those men and women who are working behind the scenes, I hope this settles down, and I hope they've got a plan, a succession plan, which of course at the moment we don't know.
Well, look, Alpine currently 6th in the team's championship. They've got 47 points. They're 40 behind McLaren. And in terms of the last couple of races, McLaren have outscored them by 58 points to nothing and leapfrogged them. If that doesn't ring alarm bells in itself, then clearly Alpine felt that we've got to do this now.
That's it, and that's true, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, a Formula One team is going to be measured by its results on track above all else, and that's where it all begins. That's the foundation of these things. You get the on-track results working well, and everything else sort of falls into place, and you've got to have the right people to make that happen. So look, hopefully they've got a longer term plan in place, and this isn't as chaotic as it looks. Maybe they've got something lined up that we're just not aware of yet, and hopefully there's a plan to get back towards the success that they all want.
Well, they'll be hoping for a good run of things in qualifying, that's for sure, which should be getting underway right about now. It's 10 minutes delayed, but we are 10 past 4 here in the UK time, but then local time, of course, in Belgium. And we do get the green light, and we are underway for the first session in Q1. 80 minutes on the clock, and it will be the bottom 5 that get knocked out. And about an hour ago, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain, grey, raining sideways, you name it. Now, okay, yes, the track is very wet. Cars on track, the spray being kicked up. But while there are grey clouds, there's some puffy white clouds and a lot of blue sky over one side of the track. And that's the thing about this track, Mark, isn't it? It's over 7 kilometres long. It's the longest track on the calendar. You can have sun at one end and hail in another.
It can be a real challenge for the teams, you know, because of course you look out the window, you have your weather apps and your radar systems and all those things, which are all very technical, but at the end of the day you quite often just look out the window, and if it's raining you put wets on, if it's dry you don't. Here you can't necessarily do that to the same extent. Interestingly, we've had cars queuing up for quite some time waiting for that green light, because this could be the driest point of the session if the rain were to come down. However, if there is no more rain for a little while, actually the quickest point of this session could be in a few laps' time, when these cars that are now on track have cleared a dry line and the track could get quicker and quicker. So judging when to go out is going to be critical, but also very difficult.
Yeah, well, out of everybody who's out there at the moment, they've all gone, unsurprisingly, onto that intermediate tyre. But with only one practice session under their belts in much heavier rain conditions, it is going to be a little bit of a step into the unknown for all. Some teams bringing upgrades as well, but how much have they been able to get out of that in practice? It's unknown at the moment. As Sainz heads out of the pits in his Ferrari, we're following the Mercedes duo, Russell and Hamilton, leading the pack as they make their way through the fast left-hander of Blanchiment down towards the bus stop chicane. We saw everybody, or not everybody, a lot of cars locking up and going deep into that corner. One driver that did have an incident, Mark, on FP1 was Logan Sargent, and actually he is still having a lot of work done to his Williams.
Yeah, he actually was one of a number of drivers that just struggled to slow the car down, locked the front tyres and slid on. Unfortunately for him, he just clipped the barrier, whereas many others got away with it. So it's not like he made a horrific mistake when others didn't, it's just that he came off slightly worse. But as we follow George Russell down the hill through Eau Rouge, through Radion and up the hill again, back onto the Kemmel Straight, it's the fastest part of the circuit. The spray coming off the back of the car is massive, to the point where if there was somebody behind him in a race situation, you just wouldn't be able to see a thing. It's like driving into a thick, solid wall of fog.
Well, the sun is peeking out from behind the clouds. The orange flares have already been let off right at the start of qualifying among some of the grandstands. But as George Russell now heads downhill through the right-hander of Beau Rivage, you can see how slippery it gets. There is almost a little bit of a dry line slightly developing. We saw some tractors on track in the 10-minute delay just sort of trying to blow and sweep the water off the main racing line, but through the double left-hander of Pouon, so easy to get a slight snap and off you go into the runoff area. And what we often see after you get through that double left-hander, rivers running across the track as well, which can be very dangerous.
Yeah, and always the best way to clear water off a racetrack is by sending race cars out. These tyres just have such deep and well-engineered grooves in them. They disperse water at such a rapid rate. So that's how we're going to get a dry line, is by getting more and more cars travelling around it, throwing this water up into the air and away from the racetrack. And that's going to happen very quickly. Over the course of 2 or 3 laps, without any more rain coming down, we will start to see a dry line forming.
Now, this is something that we could be talking about throughout qualifying a lot. As George Russell comes to the end of his lap through the bus stop chicane, he's had to find his way around 3 cars that are all slowing right down on the approach to the bus stop chicane, all trying to find themselves a gap before they start their first flying run. And that, in these conditions, is only going to get probably a little bit worse, as Hamilton has a little bit of trouble. This is the sound of the 7-time champion just getting onto the throttle, but he still finds more time than George Russell does. Both Mercedes across the line. Hamilton is fastest with a 2:02.2.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, and this is a real tough call, you know, for Formula One, because we all want to see cars on track, we want to see some action, but there's obviously a very dangerous element to this, and I don't want to sit here and be Mr. Sensible, but there have been some incidents over recent times at this circuit, even in conditions like this, and everyone's very much aware of that. There's a heightened sense of perhaps being a little bit more risk averse here than we might otherwise be. Things are fine. I think right now we're okay. There isn't rain falling. It's great that we've got cars on track, and as I said, very quickly it's going to clear up. But just seeing those cars just jostling for position at the end of a lap always terrifies me, and if the rain were to get worse, that would become an even more severe problem.
Yeah, everybody out on track now, bar Logan Sargent. Still work going on the Americans' Williams after his incident during FP1. Lando Norris in the McLaren has just gone fastest, a 2:01.8. A reminder, we are losing the bottom 5 drivers, so 16th down to 20th. Those grid positions will be fixed come the end of this 12.5 minutes, bar any post-qualifying penalties. And this is Grand Prix qualifying on a Friday afternoon. This will set the grid for Sunday's race. It's a sprint weekend. We've got the sprint shootout and the sprint race tomorrow. It's basically sprint Saturday. Either side of that, it's all Grand Prix focus. So this is main Grand Prix qualifying that we are currently setting the grid for. Q1, Norris currently fastest, looking to knock out 5 drivers. And at the moment, if Logan Sargent can't get out there with 12 minutes, he will be one of those drivers to start plumb last.
Yeah, so this is it's interesting. I actually quite like this element that comes from a sprint weekend where the teams are almost underprepared when it comes to the really important sessions like this one. They haven't had endless track time to fine-tune and tweak their cars. They kind of got what they got, and this is it. And they're going into these corners with a bit of an unknown as to what's going to happen. We've still got some drivers that have still never been through turn 1, as I said earlier, certainly not in these conditions. So everybody now finding their way on track, because no one knows if this is going to be the quickest part of the session or whether it'll be one of the slowest. So they've got to be there just in case the rain starts to come down, and that's this massive unknown that I think keeps everybody on their seat. And I think for us as spectators and fans, which is what we are, I personally think it's great.
No, I couldn't agree more. I'm loving it. I hate to bring it up though, the T word. We're already getting track limits warnings and lap times deleted. Kevin Magnussen, the latest victim of that. He went all 4 wheels past the white line into the double left-hander of Pouon. Turns 10 and 11 and had his lap time deleted.
Just done it again.
And oh no.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because on a day like today, when you've got so little grip, actually getting out on the curbs is not going to improve your lap time. In most cases, unless you're cutting a corner, it's not going to improve your lap time. And I hate to be the guy that says they need to look at every case individually and judge it, because that's kind of where we were before, and it led to all sorts of problems. But it feels slightly unfair when you might have just run wide, or you might have locked up a tyre and you just end up wide. You're going to be slower, and yet you have your lap time deleted.
Well, let's see what the 2 Hasses can do. Magnussen, on his second time around, goes up into 8th. Teammate Nico Hulkenberg crosses the line behind him and goes up into 10th. And really, it's been Hulkenberg who's had the edge in qualifying over his teammate, Kevin Magnussen. In fact, this is one of the better tracks for Nico Hulkenberg. He's qualified 4th and finished 6th in the previous sprint races as well. So he does enjoy a sprint race weekend. And this is the sound of Lando Norris, who has a huge snap, finds the gravel, but somehow keeps it pointing in a straight direction. Let's hear what he has to say.
Lando, we have possible front wing damage.
So that was coming just into the approach of Stavolo, wasn't it? Turn 14 and 15.
That's got to be terrifying, because it was high speed, wasn't it? And he lost it in a snap moment and became a passenger as Max Verstappen completes his first timed lap of the day and therefore the weekend, and it puts him 2nd on the grid at this point.
It certainly does, and off the back of one of the closest Q3s we've had in years, if not ever, the Hungarian Grand Prix, half a second celebrating the top 10 drivers. We could well be in for another tight finish here, though. Much shorter circuit in Hungary, much longer circuit here in Spa, but it's Carlos Sainz who has the fastest time at the moment, a 2 minutes and 2:05. Then it's Verstappen, Piastri, Russell, Leclerc, the top 5. Hamilton, Norris, Perez, Gasly, Ocon, the top 10. Albon, Alonso, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Bottas, and those who need to get out of the elimination zone: Zhou, Stroll, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, and Logan Sargent, who I believe has gotten out in his Williams. This is the sound of his teammate Alex Albon coming through the bus stop chicane round the final corner, and he finds a Red Bull in his face.
And that's been noted by the stewards, who are going to have a look at that. And for me, me, that looks a little bit like Max Verstappen could be in a spot of bother with that one. He was coming very slowly out the final corner, basically starting his timed lap as the Williams was just finishing his flying lap, and he's been noted for impeding. The other thing to point out is that Lando Norris, unfortunately for him, has had his lap time that put him right towards the top deleted because of track limits as well. So that's definitely going to be a feature again this weekend, and in these conditions it's very difficult to stay between the white lines.
Daniel Ricciardo finds himself currently in 18th. He's found some time in Sector 1, but I think the more they go around, the more time they will find as they start to develop more of a dry line. The rain isn't pummeling down, but the track's certainly very wet indeed. But Ricciardo in his second qualifying for AlphaTauri. In his first, he managed to out-qualify his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, and right now Ricciardo is ahead of Tsunoda, but both AlphaTauris in that elimination zone. But what can Ricciardo do as he comes into the bus stop chicane, runs a little bit deep but keeps it turned in round the final corner for Daniel Ricciardo, and a drag race to the line with himself, and he does find time. He finds almost over nearly 6/10 actually, and puts himself up into 12th.
This is a real opportunity for Daniel Ricciardo, isn't it? Last time out, I thought he had a real solid showing for his first outing for the team, but it was just that. It was his first time with the engineers, with the mechanics, first time behind the wheel of that car. It was at a tricky circuit in Hungary. This is a circuit that he knows and loves. He's done well here in the past. I'm sure a driver like Daniel would relish the opportunity to be back behind the wheel of a Grand Prix car around Spa. And this is his real opportunity to really stamp his mark, which is what he's got to do if this is a bid for a continuation of his career in Formula One. He's got to stamp his mark on the team and on the sport, and he's got to do it quite quickly. So this is the next chance for him to do that.
It certainly is. Well, the 2014 winner for the Belgian Grand Prix, currently sitting in 12th spot. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda, though, did go faster on his lap, up into 7th. But we are looking mainly at everybody from really 15th downwards. Alex Albon, currently, if it ended right now, he'd make it through into Q2, and we would lose Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Zhou and Logan Sargent. It's 2 Hasses and 2 Alfa Romeos as Valtteri Bottas heads up Eau Rouge through Raidillon. And, well, it was certainly a different tale last time out in Hungary. Zhou Guanyu up in 5th. And Valtteri Bottas just behind him as well. It was a fantastic qualifying from Alfa Romeo. They don't seem to quite at the moment be able to recapture that pace in these conditions and on this track, as Bottas is trying to wring the neck of that Alfa Romeo as best as he can.
So we will be very tight on time for a fast, slow, fast.
Let's have Lewis put his foot down then.
So by fast, slow, fast, that essentially means we go one full throttle lap with chasing time, then slow, we're keeping everything back, recharging, regenerating before we then go for one more.
Exactly that. You can be, in the old days, you could just fuel your car up and you could go for 2 flying laps, one after the other. Today, with the hybrid cars, you can't do that because you have to drain your hybrid system to get the best out of it. That means that when you start your next lap, you haven't got a full charge. So you have to do one slow lap in between your push laps to just recharge everything. The timing is everything on a day like today, because at the moment, as we said, it's not raining. The circuit's effectively getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And the guys that are currently in the bottom 5 positions, if they get their lap timing correct, could easily catapult themselves inside the top 10, as opposed to those who don't find themselves on the track at the point when it's at its quickest.
In conditions like this, absolutely, it really can be last man over the line. This is the sound of Valtteri Bottas coming into the bus stop chicane, manages to keep the rotation in his wheels. So many lockups we've seen there, and for a man who's only scored 1 point in the last 10 races, he comes across the line and it's 6th fastest for the Alfa Romeo. So we are seeing then perhaps a bit of track evolution in these last 4 minutes. So Albon, Sargent, Magnussen, Hulkenberg and Zhou currently in that elimination spot. Charles Leclerc is making his way around on track. So is Oscar Piastri, who's found a lot of time in the middle sector. Lewis Hamilton also going quite well as well, setting personal best. Pierre Gasly and Ocon in trouble down in 14th and 15th, but they're on better laps at the moment. But that can be said for pretty much everybody who's on a fast lap right now.
Yeah, and there's a couple of people that potentially are in trouble here. Daniel Ricciardo and Lance Stroll in the pits right now, and unless they get out very quickly and do a very fast out lap, well, they've got a bit of time, but not. In fact, Daniel Ricciardo already out, left the pit, so he's on his way round. But they are coming up against the clock ticking down with just 3 minutes and 20 seconds left to go. they need to be on the circuit at the point, as I said, when it's fastest. They're going to find their outlap starting with around about, I'd say, a minute, just over a minute to go, which means that'll be their last opportunity. Others who time it better and get to the checkered flag just before the timer runs out might find themselves with a much faster circuit. So I think the evolution is going to be huge here.
Pierre Gasly in the Alpine crosses the line and goes 7th fastest for the time being. He's been knocked out in Q1 3 times so far this season, hoping not to make it a 4th time. His teammate, though, at the moment, Esteban Ocon, going quicker and has just put himself up into 5th. We look to the likes of Lando Norris, who's finding time in the first sector, as Charles Leclerc has come into the pits. But do we think he's safe, Mark? Because he's down in 9th.
No, I don't think he's safe at all. He's 1.8 seconds off the leader, which is currently Hamilton, but all of the drivers behind them will start to go quickly, I would say. There's no rain falling as far as we can see. There's just rain being dispersed. Leclerc, okay, so Leclerc allowed back out. So he came in for a quick tyre change. He's now going back out again. And actually, if he gets around fairly quickly, he should just about be okay. But it's going to be very tight, isn't it?
He might get one in.
That's all he needs, but it's going to be so close. Just over 2 minutes on the clock. Lap times are, what are they at the moment?
1:58.8 from Lewis Hamilton, currently the fastest time.
Going to be a couple of seconds in it, not much more than that.
It's going to be tight. Ferrari and Leclerc playing with fire here. Hamilton is fastest then at the moment, 1:58.8. In the elimination zone, Ricciardo, Albon, Sargent, Magnussen and Hülkenberg, who everyone's on a lap at the moment. Hülkenberg is not. Neither is Daniel Ricciardo is just coming to the end of his out lap, as this is the sound of Kevin Magnussen just juttering out from the pits and having a bit of a delayed exit.
He hit the lights off
the
his
lollipop.
gantry. I don't know how that had happened. It dropped down, then it clipped the top of the car as he drove through. Hopefully everyone okay, but looks like it, and he's on his way.
He's back out there, and he's got a fine time as well, has Kevin Magnussen. He's been eliminated in Q1 in 5 of the last 6 races. Admittedly, his qualifying has not been up to scratch compared to his teammate Nico Hülkenberg, but he's found over a second so far in the first 2 sectors.
I'm not sure if he didn't just have all 4 wheels off the track again. It was very close, and they'll look at it, of course. More traffic at the end of the lap, people looking for that last position with just 40 seconds on the clock. Magnussen weaves his way through them all, and it won't hurt him too much. Let's see how he does when he crosses the line.
It's going to be last man over the line, isn't it? Kevin Magnussen then puts his foot to the floor, comes across the line and puts that Haas up into 9th spot. Albon's on a good run, so is Tsunoda. Lance Stroll finding time in the middle sector. Daniel Ricciardo also on a personal best. Albon goes up into 11th, just behind Gasly. So we look to Yuki Tsunoda, currently in 16th. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, the 2 Alfa Romeos, are on the bubble with just 8 seconds remaining of Q1, where we are eliminating the bottom 5 drivers. So 16th down to 20th is currently occupied by Tsunoda, Stroll, Ricciardo, Sargent and Hülkenberg. I don't think Hülkenberg will do it. I don't think he'll get another lap in.
Charles Leclerc timed it perfectly. It looked to me like he crossed the line with about a second to spare to start his flying lap. So let's see what he can do.
This is Yuki Tsunoda down through the gears into the braking zone for the right hand of the first stop of the bus stop chicane. Mounts the curb, boosts him nicely through the second part. The left-hander, try and get the traction on the throttle, across the line. It's 4th fastest for Yuki Tsunoda. Valtteri Bottas goes up to 6th fastest in his Alfa Romeo. The driver at risk, Fernando Alonso, Zhou Guanyu, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, Logan Sargent, Nico Hülkenberg didn't do it. Hülkenberg will start 20th and last, but Sargent, Stroll, Zhou and Alonso are all still on decent lap. Ricciardo gets up into 6th in the AlphaTauri. He makes it through. The driver at risk now, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. What have the Aston Martins got? Lance Stroll comes across the line and gets himself up into the top 10. This is the sound through the left-hand kink of Blanchimont. Full out throttle for Fernando Alonso into the braking zone once more. Into the right-hander, slings it into the left. Alonso Just a few metres left till he comes across the line. Alonso down in 16th, but he goes second fastest.
Daniel Ricciardo's had his lap time deleted for track limits. What an absolute disaster for him. Where does that put him down? Into the drop zone, unfortunately. That's Daniel Ricciardo out of qualifying.
Charles Leclerc needs to find time here. He's currently looking at elimination. Is the Monegasque in the Ferrari? This is the sound of it coming into the braking zone. The right-hander approaches first. One corner to go for Charles Leclerc, who's currently down in 16th. He's found time. How much quicker can he go? He crosses the line. He goes fastest and finds 2 seconds. His teammate Sainz goes up into 4th. Leclerc fastest. What can Albon do as he comes across the line? He can't find too much time either. The Williams out of this session. Albon 16th. Zhou Guanyu 17th. Logan Sargeant is 18th. It'll be heartbreak for Daniel Ricciardo and AlphaTauri, who was up in the top 6, but exceeding track limits with a lap time deleted puts him down into 19th in front of only the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg.
Oh, that's a shocker for Daniel Ricciardo. It's also a shocker for Williams, quite frankly. This is a circuit which should suit their car.
Daniel, lap time deleted.
Yeah, sorry. I just lost it a bit through 3 and drifted wide. Sorry.
Well, he knew he'd done it. He knew he'd done it, and that is an absolute disaster for Daniel Ricciardo. He's going to have to start all the way back in 19th place when he clearly had the pace to be way up there alongside his teammate. Could have been a really strong showing for AlphaTauri. Lando Norris just about getting away with it. Had an early promising lap time deleted, finished 14th, so just ahead of the drop zone. Sails through to the next part of qualifying, as does Kevin Magnussen, just about in 15th. So it was all to play for at the bottom. Timing was everything, and those who got it right found themselves with the lap times to reward them and get them through to the next part of the session.
Absolutely. Kevin Magnussen will be pleased with that. He manages to out-qualify Nico Hülkenberg for the first time in 6 races. Zhou Guanyu disappointed in 17th, while his teammate Valtteri Bottas makes it through into Q2. Of course, Zhou, career best start, 5th last time around at the Hungaroring. Logan Sargeant with issues getting that car out in time after the incident in FP1, did manage to get it out in time and puts it into 18th. We've mentioned Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg. I wonder if Nico Hülkenberg was a timing issue, because I was monitoring his progress through the sectors, and the flag came out just as he was coming into the bus stop chicane, but he was on an outlap. So I wonder if that was just a bit of a timing error on Hülkenberg and Haas's part.
It could well be. As I said, I think from looking at it, Charles Leclerc and Ferrari got that absolutely spot on with just a second or so to spare, and look what happened. He puts himself at the top of the timesheets with a brilliant final sector that got him all the way up clear of everybody. So timing was everything. The next big decision for these teams and drivers as we move into the second part is how quickly, if there's no more rain, can we move on to a slick set of tyres? Dry parts of the circuit just starting to become visible, whereas at other sections, still very wet.
It's certainly going to be something that the drivers have to weigh up as we have a little breather before we head into Q2, where the next 5 will be eliminated. So that will start in a few minutes' time. Race Control are informing us at 5:35 local time. But compared to FP1, a lot more smiles and happier faces in the grandstands. Everybody giving us a wave here in Belgium, in the Ardennes countryside, in the forest. Eastern Belgium we are for the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, and the longest in the calendar, just over 7 kilometres. Q1 complete. We have lost our bottom 5. They have set their grid positions. Albon in 16th, Zhou Guanyu 17th, Sargeant 18th, Daniel Ricciardo 19th, and Nico Hülkenberg 20th and last, on a track that started very wet and is now starting to dry out. But as Mark suggests, who will make the call first? When will the track be ready to try a slick tyre? That will be the question as we head into Q2 next.
It's going to be one of those really tough decisions, and it may well be that it's getting an early lap in on a set of inters, exploring the circuit, just seeing what you find when you get out there, because it's such a long lap. As we touched on earlier, you can have very, very different conditions at different parts of the circuit. So I think the only way to really find out is to get out there and try it. So that's what they'll be doing in the early part of the session. Incidentally, for anyone who was waiting on a decision on Max Verstappen, him being noted for impeding Alex Albon early in the session, that was looked at and decided no further action necessary.
So Lewis Hamilton comes to the end of the pit lane. He is eager to get out there, and he is going straight onto an intermediate tyre. as Alex Albon walks past him, helmet off, and makes his way to be weighed and do the obligatory post-qualifying scrutineering with the FIA. And we're just getting some lovely replay shots, actually, of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari and the movement going on of that rear wing as he comes down the Kemmel Straight into the braking zone. That's a shaky rear wing.
It really is. We had that a bit. Was it one of the Alpines that happened in, I think, Canada? Looked like it was about to fall off, but it's actually just a sort of an oscillation. You get a particular set of frequencies running through the car, and if they happen to match the frequencies of the rear wing, it can just accentuate that movement. But here we go, Q2.
Okay, we get underway then, and we look to secure positions into the top 10 shootout. So everybody from 11th down to 15th will be eliminated come the end of what are we now, just over 14.5 minutes of this Q2 session. And it's the two Mercedes that are straight out of Hamilton and George Russell. Alonso, Piastri join them, followed by Bottas, Ocon, Stroll, Magnussen, all straight out there on the intermediate tyre as well. Here's Lewis Hamilton.
Is there rain on the radar?
Nothing at the moment, and so we're thinking, it's going to be transitioning to dry very soon.
I was just going to say, this is going to be slicks. Looking at it, it's going to be slicks by the end of this session. And as we said earlier, the big question is when, because there are some very dry sections where there's almost a full dry line, and that you absolutely want to be on a dry tyre, because that will destroy an intermediate tyre pretty quickly. And yet you get to some corners where it's still quite wet. Not rivers, it's not flooded, it's not standing water, but it's wet. And if you touch a wet curve with a slick tyre, you are off. So this is where the drivers are going to really earn their money, both in helping to make that decision, but once they've made the decision, keeping the car on the track when it's at its most tricky.
Yeah, it is still grey. There are still some ominous clouds, but between them there's some blue skies and the sun peeking through here at Spa ahead of the Belgian Grand Prix. This is qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix. It's a sprint weekend, which means it's a rejig of the format. So Saturday really becomes sprint day. We have the sprint shootout on Saturday morning for qualifying basically for the sprint race that same day. So it's a bit of a standalone event now. So this is very much, if you're tuning in and wondering why we're qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix so early, that is the reason why. With 13 minutes to go of this Q2 session. Here's Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, it's not too far off slicks.
Confirming what you were saying, Mark. Although we have seen it on some occasions, that if you run the intermediate tyre long enough, you can convert it into a slick.
You can. It will never give you the same performance, but you're right. As it wears down, of course, the tread depth becomes less. You get less movement in the surface of the tyre, and it can offer up more grip on certain situations. We actually just saw a really interesting shot where the sun was beaming down on the circuit. You can see the water literally evaporating off the circuit before our eyes. I mean, how different is that to just a very short time ago when everyone had their umbrellas up and it was torrential?
It's worked out quite nicely, and there is very much a dry line starting to develop. Lewis Hamilton, this is the sound of the seventh-time champion in his Mercedes, making his way down the Kemmel Straight, reaching the highest speeds around this circuit before you get into the braking zone of Les Combes, and a very technical part of this track, and the right-hander, quickly followed by another left, and then a right-hander, which brings you downhill as we start to then head through Beaurivage into the second part of this track. It's a good first sector for Lewis Hamilton. Alonso as well, also looking quick as he begins his first flying lap. Piastri's out there, Russell, Bottas, Ocon, all on very good laps at the moment as Perez begins a lap as well.
Yeah, so the prediction at the moment is no more rain as this for the rest of this session at least. It is starting to dry up, but right now what everyone's doing is they're out on intermediate tyres, effectively getting a banker lap in, because this could be, if it did rain again, and that can change very quickly despite the predictions, if it rained again, this might be the fastest part of the session. So you've got to get a banker in now, and then it'll be come back into the pits and probably wait for a little while for the first person to break cover on slicks. That's essentially, I think, what's how this is going to play out, with at the moment just over 11 minutes left on the clock.
Who makes that call? Is it solely the driver, or is it a bit of toing and froing with the strategy?
It's always a combination. The driver has the best feel underneath him because he's out there, but the engineers have the radar equipment, they have the full readings, they have data, they have the data of everybody else and anyone else that might have already gone onto slicks. They can see what they're doing. The driver doesn't necessarily have that perspective. So it's a combination, but on a day like today, when you're making the decision on the fly, the driver really has to come into their own, and experienced drivers really are worth their weight in gold at moments like this.
Well, first lap times coming through then. Hamilton was fastest momentarily, Russell behind him, but Valtteri Bottas has gone quicker than them both. Scratch that, Kevin Magnussen goes faster as well. So it seems with every car that goes over the line, they find a couple more tenths. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, the rookie driver, searching for a maiden podium, really, with his teammate off the back of back-to-back second places. Piastri goes fastest by over a second in his McLaren from Magnussen, Bottas, Hamilton, Russell and Stroll. The 6 drivers to have come across the line so far. Esteban Ocon drags that Alpine around the final corner, and with 10 minutes to go, it's Ocon now who's in second.
I love sessions like this. It's changing constantly. You can't just fine-tune your car. You've got to get out there, you've got to be on track at the right time, then the driver has to deliver under pressure, the team have got to make the right decisions at the right moments. This is what Formula One is all about. It's what the best Formula One teams do incredibly well, working under immense pressure and getting everything right. If you do that, you will come out of a session like this on top.
What has our reigning world champion got in store for us? Max Verstappen comes across the line and goes fastest in front of his teammate by just under half a second. So Perez having a better run of things so far in qualifying. Sainz comes across the line, only 9th for the Ferrari driver. We look to Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda and Norris, who are now all in the elimination zone, along with Lewis Hamilton. Yuki Tsunoda comes around the final corner and across the line. The Japanese racer in the AlphaTauri puts it up into 7th, and that knocks Sainz down into 11th. But as you say, Mark, we can't get too excited, because actually 8 minutes and 54 seconds is still a very, very long time.
It is a long time.
That whole leaderboard could change around in a heartbeat.
It will do, and I suspect what's going to happen here is when they all do find their way back into the garage, somebody, probably a back marker with not too much to lose, is going to take the gamble. They're going to put slicks on. Everybody else is going to be watching intently when that happens, and if the timing is towards the end of the session, what's going to happen is everyone's going to have to put slicks on, get out there just in case they find that it's quicker, so that they're on track before the clock runs down and are able to take advantage of that quicker track with the dry tyres. So it's going to be a real game of cat and mouse to who goes first, but everyone else is going to have to be covering, even if it's a back marker, they're going to have to be covering them with slick tyres towards the end of the session.
As the sun starts to beam down harder and harder in Spa, Lando Norris is the only driver yet to set a lap time, but he is on his way to do so. He comes through Beau Rivage and now makes his way towards the double left-hander of Pouhon, which takes you right downhill in this undulating track that sits in the heart of the Ardennes forest in Belgium. We're quite close to the borders of Germany and the Netherlands here. And Lando Norris then, as that McLaren in the papaya orange makes its way through and overtakes a little bit of traffic. The AlphaTauri and the Alpine do stay quite nicely out of his way. And as he comes through into Stavelot, a dry line very much appearing. There's still a little bit of spray that kicks off from the tyres as soon as you dip a wheel off the racing line. But actually, if you're driving straight on the racing line, you are not kicking up any spray. But as he comes through into the approach of Blanchimont, the fast left-hand kick, you are forced to kick up a little bit of water. So it's that crossover time that is going to be absolutely crucial. What can Lando Norris do, though, as he comes round the final corner? And he's decided, I thought he'd do this. I think he thinks it's ready for slicks. He comes into the pits.
That last section of the lap, which is what we've just followed on our screens, we've followed Lando through the whole final sector. It's almost, the whole sector's
After
almost...
all that, Lando.
It's almost flat out, isn't it? That final sector, incredibly quick. You're flat out for almost all of that sector, and most of it was dry. Here we go. Lando puts a set of soft tyres on and straight back out with 6.5 minutes to go. The Ferrari of the Charles Leclerc does exactly the same. This is where things get really interesting, because now everybody has effectively got to come in and do the same, and it's a shootout in the last 6 minutes.
There we go. So everybody's coming onto the softs now, pretty much. Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Piastri, Ocon, Gasly will head out the pits. Tsunoda's in the pits, changing tyres. Magnussen is making his way back to the pits. Alonso's now gone out on softs, as has Valtteri Bottas too. Russell, and we just saw Norris do that too. So a 6-minute shootout then to get yourself into the top 10. Let's see how that pans out. A reminder, we're looking to eliminate the bottom 5 drivers from this section from 11th down to 15th.
And the really big risk here is that everyone's got to get their lap in and avoid, or potentially avoid, the situation which is highly likely here. We get yellow flags. Somebody is going to go off. It's dry tyres on a fairly wet track at certain points. Someone's going to go off. There'll be yellow flags, and that can ruin somebody's lap time. So the quicker you can get a banker lap in that makes it safe for you, the better it's going to be.
This is the sound of Valtteri Bottas. So this is a full, proper lap then. His first lap on those soft tyres on a drying circuit up through Eau Rouge. Has to lift off slightly, but there is a dry line there. And now onto the Kemmel Straight and out into the sun. The blue skies overhead. The grandstands packed to the left-hand side into the braking zone.
Every corner's a journey into the unknown here. You don't know what the car's going to do. It's the first time they've been on slicks during the session. It's the first time they go into these corners, which still got very wet curbs. No one knows how their car's going to react.
They'll need more than one lap to get up to speed, that's for sure. Yeah. Because getting temperature into these tyres on this track, even though there is a dry line, it's going to take... I mean, Bottas didn't find any time in that first sector, so he's going to have to do another lap, surely. 2 push and then 2 warm. Then a push.
You're going to have to, yeah, exactly. You're going to need around 6 minutes, which is why they all put the slicks on when they did, so they can go out, do an exploratory fast lap, recharge everything up, and then go for the big flyer with a couple of minutes still to spare towards the end. George Russell's radio.
Yeah, we're still thinking fast, slow, fast, George.
I disagree.
I'm thinking fast, fast, slow, George. That's what I'm thinking. And I wonder if he's thinking the same, because by the time you can do a warm-up lap, but then especially if you've got to get out of the way of another car as well coming through, you immediately have to go onto the damp part of the track, and that's going to absolutely lose you all temperature. Like on the Kemmel Straight now, George Russell has just had to go around the Ferrari, and you can see the spray that is immediately kicked up from the tyres as soon as you divvy off that narrow racing line, and that immediately cools the tyres down.
Absolutely right, very, very true. It can happen massively quickly, and it can change the behaviour of the car hugely. Don't forget, of course, in conditions like this, having maximum power, i.e. a fully charged battery that you can deploy at every part of the lap, isn't quite as critical, because you literally can't get the power down through those slicks onto a damp circuit. So it's not about having the same punch out of a corner that you'd want on a fully dry circuit. So maybe you can go for a lap that hasn't got a completely fully charged battery and just perfect your line, get your technique right, get everything as it should be up to speed mechanically, and using the combustion part of your engine. Is Ocon?
I hit the wall, guys. Now I think the front wing's gone.
Yeah, Esteban Ocon with damage on his front wing, so he's clearly had to come in together. It is still just about hanging on, but it looks like it might drop off at any minute. Will he be able to turn into the left-hander? Because the right side of that front wing is running very low to the floor and very close to his front right tyre, but he should be able to get that back into the pits. He comes into the bus stop chicane now, and we can get a look at how it happens. So through Beau Rivage into the left-hander, and that's the sound of Ocon going into the gravel and taking a bit of advertising hoarding with him.
Just no grip. He wasn't even going particularly quickly, but just no grip. The slick tyres got onto a damp part of the circuit, and he just slides off, and it's almost one of those embarrassingly slow incidents, but it's caused a lot of damage. His problem now is, I don't think he's going to have enough time to get back in, change that wing, and get back out before the clock ticks down to 0.
Well, let's see. Ocon was up in 5th with his teammate behind him, and Lance Stroll had a great view of Esteban Ocon going into the wall. And unfortunately, so much of a good view, he had lots of gravel suddenly hit him in the face and go into the cockpit of that Aston Martin, so I don't think he'll be too pleased about that. But with under 2 minutes remaining then, everybody out there on the soft compound of tyre, and currently in the elimination zone, it's Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Stroll and Norris. But now, after a lap or so of getting these soft tyres up to speed, we are finding the time in these transitional conditions. Started off very wet, the dry line appearing, and Oscar Piastri finding plenty of time in that middle sector. He's currently 4th fastest as he comes into the bus stop chicane, and I think he might have just been bailing out of it in that final corner to go for one final flyer. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton, makes his way through the final corner now. Personal best sector 1 and 2. What's Hamilton got? It's enough to see him up into 4th.
The problem is we're going to have exactly the same situation here, where last man on track, like we had in the first part of qualifying, is probably going to get the best of the conditions. Now, who do we think that's going to be? It could be Piastri, it could be Hamilton,
could be Tsunoda.
Max Verstappen about to start a lap, so Max Verstappen will also get decent conditions, but there'll be others that follow him round, so keep an eye on Piastri, keep an eye on Hamilton.
Norris finding time in the middle sector. He's currently 15th and plumb last at the moment out of our 15 runners. We are looking to eliminate 11th down to 15th. George Russell crosses the line though and finds a lot of time to go fastest. Scratch that, Lando Norris pips him to it by 0.8 of a second. That puts Tsunoda and now Gasly down into the elimination zone as Carlos Sainz puts himself up into second. Leclerc losing a bit of time in the middle sector and tentatively makes his way through the final corner. What has the Monegasque got as he comes across the line? I think he well and truly bailed out of it right at the end to get a one proper final lap. Leclerc currently down in 8th spot as Ocon will not get another go at it. Tsunoda finding time. Magnussen may well be the one that was last man over the line.
Yeah.
Alonso is going well in the middle sector, and Bottas, who comes through the final corner now in his Alfa Romeo, up into Q3 at the Hungarian Grand Prix this time last week, and it's third fastest for the Finnish racer so far.
Oscar Piastri on a very good lap as well. He's going to finish his lap. He's in the final sector now, and then Hamilton also on a really solid lap, but there are still others behind them. Look at that, Tsunoda goes first.
By nearly a second, Yuki Tsunoda finding the time. Then it's Piastri who beats him to it by 1.6 seconds. What's Hamilton got? He's got enough for second. This is going to be a dramatic change in the last couple of seconds of qualifying. In fact, the clock has now timed down to 0. So these will be the final flyers. Lance Stroll will be next to cross the line in the Aston Martin. He's currently 11th. He's up into second. What has Sergio Perez got? He managed to get into the top 10 last time around after a poor run of form, and he's through into Q3 for the time being. Up in 4th, Fernando Alonso will be the next man to cross the line in the Aston Martin. Has a little bit of a snap on the steering wheel as he comes into the right-hander for the bus stop chicane. Still finds time. It's enough for 6th. Russell through to 5th. That already puts Bottas down into 10th. Verstappen currently in 11th. A reminder, Max Verstappen has a 5-place grid penalty.
I think Piastri could have this, you know.
He might well.
I think Piastri, I don't think anyone is going to beat Piastri time. And if it's Verstappen, we know he's moving back. Look, only 9th for Verstappen. He had a terrible first part of the lap. It's going to be Piastri.
That is brilliant. Leclerc up into 3rd. A reminder, we are looking to get through into Q3 here. Tsunoda in 11th. Magnussen can only do 12th. Scratch that. Gasly's up into 12th. Magnussen 13th. Bottas 14th. Ocon couldn't get another lap in after his skirmish with the wall. 15th. But by a whisker, Max Verstappen makes it through into Q3, and we lose Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas and Esteban Ocon.
Love that. Absolutely love sessions like that. How on earth did Max Verstappen scrape through? I mean, what a shocker that would have been. I mean, he'd have probably still found his way to the front when it came to Sunday's race. But P10 for Verstappen makes it through into the 3rd part of qualifying. But an absolutely blistering lap from Oscar Piastri finishes that particular session on top. That was great stuff from the McLaren driver.
And that was just Q2. I kind of wish that had been Q3. And unfortunately, Race Control have said the start of Q3 will be delayed. And I wonder if they're going to have a little look at the wall that Ocon went into, just to see if that needs a little bit of a repair while they do that. So hopefully it wouldn't be too long. They haven't given us a specific time.
There's a bit of gravel on the circuit at that same point as well, I think, so it could be that too. But
well, we'll see it actually, because we are riding on board with Kevin Magnussen at the moment through the left-hander. It's the corner with no name really, and he finds the exact same part that Ocon found the wall, except he hits it rear end first and around he goes. So comes into the left-hander, just goes onto the wet stuff, round he goes. And I think actually that was gravel. A little bit of a skirmish with the wall, kicks up even more gravel onto the track.
What the? I don't know who that guy was that Haas, but I hope he gets a penalty.
And that was Charles Leclerc complaining about the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, I imagine, for impeding as they were coming towards the end of Pouhon. but I think Magnussen was just trying to get his act together after having a skirmish with the wall there, and that is the reason why we have a delayed start. Gravel on the track being kicked up from turn 9, the left-hander, which brings you then downhill towards the double left-hander of Pouon. So the marshals will be getting to work and just replacing the advertising hoardings there and making sure the gravel is off the track. But a little bit of time to breathe then for our top 10 shootouts, but we lose Yuki Tsunoda, 11th, his best qualifying performance since Monaco, where he started in 9th position. Pierre Gasly down in 12th, and he's only reached Q3 once in his 6 visits to this track, and that doesn't get any better today. Magnussen out-qualifies Nico Hülkenberg in 13th, but might well be under a little bit of investigation for his incident with Leclerc in the dying stages of Q2. Bottas down in 14th, and Esteban Ocon did come and hit the wall. He managed to get it out to the pits, but not with enough time to repair the damage done and get out for a proper flyer. So 15th was the best the Frenchman could do.
Yeah, and Esteban Ocon, I think at the time of his accident, was up in sort of 4th or 5th. So that shows you the evolution in that final few minutes. He's ended up in the bottom of that pack in P15. Just such was the evolution of the track and the lap times as a result. So I love these sessions because everything's changing. You've got to be making these decisions on the fly. The drivers have to really react to how the car's behaving rather than being prepared and knowing, almost 100% knowing what the car's going to do, because you've had hours and hours of practice. The circuit's dry, you know it's predictable. It's the opposite here. It's unpredictable, and then the drivers have to react at each and every corner. And this is where you get the drivers who are best at doing that, but the bravest drivers, those who are willing to take a bit of a risk. Here's Max Verstappen.
I should have just pushed 2 laps in a row, like I said.
So you are through, Max?
Yeah, I don't give a if I'm through in P10. Just execution.
Okay, and then when the track was 2 seconds quicker for your final lap and you didn't have any energy left, how would that have gone down? But you tell me what you want to do in Q3 and we'll do it. Let me know. Sets, fuel, front plan.
Oh, feisty. I've had so many conversations like that with drivers where they all think they know they know best, and they only know their bit from the driver's seats, which is a really important bit, and they have a lot of information that the team don't have, as we said earlier, but the team will always have a bigger picture, and often drivers don't get that. So that's Max's engineer telling him that they had to cover off the fact that if he needed to go again and the circuit suddenly became quicker, they had to reserve a bit of energy or recharge the car on a lap to top the energy store up. And Max was saying that he should have just gone for it and expelled all that that energy on 2 laps. But look, it's one of those things. He's through, but he just hates being in P10. I mean, that's an insight into his character, isn't it?
And yes, his engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambaisi, I mean, they have a great relationship, clearly, and he's able to sort of put Max in his place a little bit and say it how it is. I think a lot might crumble under that, but GP's been working with Max for a very long time and will know exactly how to speak to his driver. A bit of work being done on some of the cars, particularly Lando Norris. A lot of the engineers and mechanics having a look at the floor on the right-hand side of that McLaren. I think I've even seen a bit of gaffer tape being get at, so I wonder if he's...
Well, he ran over the gravel,
yes,
didn't he?
Didn't he, right at the start?
These floors are so sensitive with so many little turning vanes underneath, which are very thin pieces of carbon, all there to do a very specific job, but it doesn't take much once you leave the tarmac for them to get ripped off, and that can have a big impact on your performance.
I love this because I genuinely actually don't know who's going to get pole position.
No, it's great, isn't it?
Like, I could not call it. Who's your pick? Come on.
I mean, I actually think McLaren stand a decent shout here, either of them. I mean, I think Lando's been itching or inching closer and closer over the last few races to a really, really strong result. And this is a circuit which should suit their car. It's high speed corners. I think that should be one of their strengths. So, I mean, it's hard to ever look past Verstappen, but I think the 2 McLarens have got a decent shout here.
I think I'd agree with you. Oscar Piastri for a first pole position in Formula One. Now, wouldn't that be something for McLaren? Lando Norris looking very pacey as well. So we do have in our top 10 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris, 2 Aston Martins, 2 Mercedes and 2 Red Bulls. So it really is 2 by 2 by 2. And this is actually good news for the likes of Sergio Perez, who does get into Q3 yet again. He did qualify 9th, but he does seem to be more on the pace this weekend.
Yeah,
when it comes to one lap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that result last time out in Hungary, despite the troubles earlier in the weekend, the result on Sunday I think was a really positive one, and everyone was quite buoyant about how he'd come through the field. And as we touched earlier on, that confidence and how people are talking about you, how the world is looking at you, they're all aware of it. And I think it has a massive impact on your performance in the car. So last Sunday's result, particularly given it was only a week away, less than a week past, I think he'll still be riding off that. And so maybe that's what we're seeing, a little bit more confidence on a circuit which he loves. And let's hope he can carry it through the weekend.
Well, at a track where Lewis Hamilton holds the record for the most pole positions, 6. It's McLaren and Ferrari who are tied on the most poles for 11 in terms of the teams that have taken pole position here at this challenging Spa-Francorchamps circuit ahead of the 12th race of the Formula One season. And race control letting us know that Q3, the battle for the top 10, will start at 6:03 local time, so in about 3 minutes time we should get Q3 underway. Slightly delayed due to gravel and some advertising boardings on the wall needing to be cleared up after being hit first by Esteban Ocon's Alpine and then Kevin Magnussen's Haas. They are now both out of this session, having not made it through into Q3, but really is the battle for pole up next. And for the first time in a while we can say, because we were all shocked when Hamilton got pole last time around, but now we can actually say genuinely we really don't know who's going to get pole. Max Verstappen has a five-place grid penalty for using a gearbox outside of his allocation that is allowed for the season, so he will get those 5 places applied. So if he does take pole on the road, he will start 6th at best.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because, look, I think Max Verstappen still has the pace in dry conditions. I still don't think anyone comes anywhere near to what he can deliver, particularly around this circuit, which should really suit the high-speed nature of that Red Bull car. But it's not a dry circuit. It's still treacherous. We haven't had any more rain, so it is drying. There's definitely a dry line. But you only need to be 6 to 12 inches off that dry line, and then it's very damp. You only need to drop a wheel over a curb, which are painted and so slippery when they hold water, that can be the end of your session. It can be the end of your lap in a moment when you're pushing it. You might just step over the white line as you run wide, and all 4 wheels off the track, you're done for track limits. So there's a lot to navigate here to still get through with a lap time that's representative of your car. So there's no way we can count this as a Max Verstappen absolute pole position, or certainly fastest lap time. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. Can't wait.
Okay then, well, we've still got a couple of minutes before we get underway for Q3, and some of the drivers just taking their time in the garages, getting in the zone, Lando Norris being one of them. And this is the battle really that we're focusing on in Formula One this year. The title might well be sewn up, but it is this battle for second that we're really getting diced into between the likes of Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Alpine a little less so in the last couple of races, fallen behind a bit. They had great highs from Monaco with the podium that they achieved with Esteban Ocon, but as we discussed right at the top of the session, big changes coming to their management as well. And actually, they had the Formula One Commission meeting today, didn't they, Mark? And one of the big things Alpine were pushing was power unit engine equalisation, because they're a bit down on power to the rest of them.
Don't get me started, Harry. Don't get me started. We could go on for hours about that. They've asked to have the engine equalisation, which means a balancing of performance, essentially because they're a little bit behind the rest. And at the moment, we don't have a decision on that. We can discuss it as much as you like later in the podcast. But at the moment, they've deferred that decision to the Engine Commission, so we don't have an answer.
It's been referred to another referral. That's what's going on with there. But we will have the Checkered Flag podcast out for you later as well. So do look out on the BBC Sounds app and wherever you get your podcasts for that. Looking back at qualifying and previewing the rest of the weekend as well. But Q3 officially underway then, and the battle for pole position gets underway, but nobody's in a massive rush to come out. But the 2 Mercedes, I think, are going to greet us first. Russell and Hamilton just in front. And then we will await the Red Bulls as the tyre blankets come off. The soft set of tyres on for Max Verstappen. The same is said for his teammate Sergio Perez as the sun glints off of Sergio Perez's luminous helmet. And the dry line very much here. The rain that was falling about an hour and a half ago or so very much stopped. We do have a damp track offline, but a very, very dry track online, and has been developing over the course of Q2 and into Q3. But they really are, even as they crawl out of the pit lane, trying to find themselves all a bit of a gap on track here.
Yeah, traffic less of an issue, of course, in this session because there's only 10 cars as opposed to the 15 we had last time out. So there'd be literally a bit more space on circuit with fewer cars there. However, it's critical that you find that gap for when it matters. And we're still going to have, to some extent, towards the end of these opening out laps, people jostling for position to make sure they've got a gap, enough of a gap built in before they start their flying lap. So that's what they're all trying to work on now, getting tyres up to temperature, which is tricky in these conditions, just getting a little feel for the conditions, because they will have evolved over the past few minutes, and then finding that all-important gap when it comes to starting your flying lap.
Well, take your pick for pole, because it won't be Max Verstappen, so that's going to be fun automatically. 10 minutes to go then for Q3, and this is the sound of the two-time champion Max Verstappen, who makes his way through the left-hander and the approach to the double left-hander of Pouon. Piastri was out there and will come across the line with the first proper lap time that we will see here. But I wonder how they all treat the strategy for this, because there's been a bit of disagreement. Actually, Russell wasn't quite happy with what his team was saying. Neither was Verstappen about, well, we do push and then, or we do push push or push cool. So the track evolving all the time, the conditions evolving all the time, it really is going to be in the hands of the driver.
It is, to some extent, yeah. I mean, they've had the last session to get a bit of a handle on that, so they might have tried something last session and it might have worked for them or not, and they can tweak that as appropriate for this session. But it's all about timing. You've got to be on a push flying lap at the point when the circuit's in its best conditions, and with no more rain forecast for this session, it's going to be the dying seconds. That's when the track's going to be really busy, and everyone needs to find their gap and beyond a push lap with batteries charged up, ready to go.
Uphill for Lando Norris, through Eau Rouge, onto Radion and down the Kemmel Straight as he flies past the fans that sit on the grassy bankings either side of the Kemmel Straight. He makes his way through. He actually had a bit of a moment on his warm-up lap coming into the right hand of Lecom, but managed to keep it pointing in a straight line. The rear really kicked around on it, but kept it going. Runs quite deep coming into Beau Rivage, but follows the line nicely into the left-hander with no name, and doesn't do what Ocon and Magnussen does, and keeps it out of the wall through Pouon. That's where you really get an idea of the speeds these cars are carrying. 270 kilometers an hour as they come through the apex of Pouon. And it's Lando Norris who is finding time, but these are the first lap times we will see in Q3.
Yeah, the latter stages of this lap where it really is flat out and you're leaning on the car so much. It's even terrifying playing this on the F1 game. You know, it's terrifying that you know that the car could break away at any minute.
Especially in the wet.
Yeah, exactly. So on a damp track, on slick tyres, that must be terrifying.
Especially when Mark Priestley comes in your ear and tells you need to pit for slicks, and it's definitely not slicks. Unbelievable how many times that's happened to me. Across the line then, first lap times coming in, and it's from Fernando Alonso, a 1:49.1. Lando Norris finishes his lap time and goes fastest with a 1:48.5. No, that was 1:48.7 because Piastri comes across the line with a 1:48.5. It's two McLarens currently on the front row, but we've still got 7 minutes before we see who's really got what. This is Verstappen coming into the braking zone. The sound you can hear for the bus stop chicane, down through the gears into the right hand to take a bit of curb. Almost gives you a little bit of a jolt towards the left-hander to see you through around the final corner, and it's the fastest lap time we've seen by almost half a 10.
But everybody's going quicker and quicker. Now Leclerc goes quickest. The circuit's evolving at an incredible rate because more and more cars just mean the circuit gets drier, the dry line gets wider, And look, now Leclerc is quickest with Verstappen second, Piastri, then Norris, and then Alonso. But that is almost certainly not how it's going to finish. This is going to get quicker. Here comes Sainz, who's also on a good lap.
It's almost like we need a fast forward button to the last 3 minutes, and that's when you really get an idea of what's going on. But it's the build-up and the anticipation of what is to come. Sainz is fastest in the first sector, Piastri fastest in the middle sector, and then Sainz again in sector 3. So that Ferrari's got pace, but he's losing a bit of time in that middle sector compared to his teammate, who currently has the fastest lap time. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton coming through the bus stop chicane, and as he comes through the right-hander, the rear just steps out on him, Mark, and he has to correct it coming into the final corner.
He lost a little bit of time, and actually it's a really decent lap up to that point, so we'll see what it is when he finishes as he crosses the line. But actually it's not a bad lap from Hamilton so far, but I think he clearly lost time. Everybody else is going to be starting to now wind down on a recharge lap before they then go again with 5.5 minutes to go. Not sure this is going to be quick enough for Hamilton, but it's not a bad start.
And in these conditions as well, they're all wearing clear visors, so you can really see, we saw in the replay, the whites of Hamilton's eyes and where he's looking. Absolutely fantastic to see. He's always looking the corner ahead of the one he's actually already in as he comes round the final corner. DRS now activated and open. The rear wing flap on the back of these cars slides open in the allocated zones to give, to reduce drag and give you a little bit more straight line speed. Hamilton comes across in 6th. Russell can only do 9th.
Yeah, disappointing from the Mercedes. I think, last time out we got such a strong result with Lewis getting pole on the Saturday. But this is a circuit that's probably not going to suit their car quite as much as Hungary did. Even so, with conditions like this, as we keep saying, anything can happen, and the circuit will continue to get quicker as most people now come into the pits. And now it's that calm before the storm. They have a little chat with their engineer. There's very little you can do to the cars. They're in parc fermé. The only thing you can change really are things like tyre pressures or a small tweak to the front wing angle. Other than that, it's sticking a fresh set of soft tyres on, wait for the optimum moment, and then off they go. And then it's all in the hands of these 10 drivers still on circuit to deliver what they have to do under immense pressure in very difficult conditions.
They do this week in, week out, but it really is, when it gets to the top 10 gladiators making their way out to set the fastest lap time they possibly can on some of the most challenging tracks, and Spa being one of them. Challenging, historic, over 7 kilometers long, over 4.3 miles, 19 turns, 10 to the right, 9 to the left, elevation changes galore in the hills of the Ardennes countryside here in Belgium, very close to the German and Dutch borders. We're now in that lull before we get the final push for lap times, with just under 3.5 minutes remaining to find out who will start Sunday's Belgian Grand Prix from pole position. Carlos Sainz in his Ferrari is awaiting the all clear. He of course started on pole last year after penalties were applied, but it's his teammate at the moment, Charles Leclerc, who has the advantage of the fastest lap time and provisional pole. But let's see how much time our drivers can find and eke out in these closing stages of Q3.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the guys going out the garage now, so both Ferraris, one of the Red Bulls so far, I wonder if they're going to go, in fact lots of people coming out now, I wonder if it'll be 2 slow laps before a final push lap, just crossing the line before the checkered flag comes out for the final flying lap. Of course, with a strategy like that, if that is what some of them are going to do, just warm the tyres up, get everything into the right temperature window before they really go for it, you're relying on nobody else having any issues that might bring out things like yellow flags that could then ruin your lap. With just 2.5 minutes left to go, there's high risk at this stage, and there have been cases in the past where actually just getting out there, even though it's not the optimum time, but getting a lap on the board could end up being a strategy, particularly for those with nothing much to lose, being one that's worth taking.
Well, they are all making their way to the end of the pit lane and all coming out. So we haven't got anybody waiting and sort of running out of sequence in a way. There's not enough time to really do that.
No, and just as I said that, I realise actually within this top 10, there's nobody with nothing to lose. Well, every one of these drivers has a shot at being in the top 3 or 4 positions.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I was going to say Stroll, but I imagine he would want to be up in there in the top 3 or 4. In terms of being in the thick of the battle for those championship positions. Maybe I'm doing a disservice to Stroll. Maybe I'm being, I'll take it back, Lance. I'll take it back. We all want to see a good fight, don't we? And it really will be a one-lap dash to the end. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc making his way. He's just come through the Pouhon into Lefania and now through and into the approach of Stavelot around the back end of the track through the 14 and 15.
So it looks like the last guy to set a lap is likely to be Sergio Perez with the way they've gone out the pits, assuming it gets round, which he will, with 1 minute and 10 seconds left on the clock. It's going to be Sergio Perez probably who will be the last man to set a lap time, and will that work in his favour?
Yeah, he's got the two Mercedes in front of him, but he's finding a bit of a gap here, but he's got to be careful because he just needs to make sure he can cross the line with enough time. Should be doable, but first of all, it will be Charles Leclerc, followed by the two McLarens, who will begin their final flyers here for Q3 for the Belgian Grand Prix.
Yeah, so Charles Leclerc starts a flying lap, Lance Stroll starts a flying lap, Carlos Sainz is on his way as well. Keep an eye on all of these people, because any incident, any leaving the circuit, finding yourself in the gravel, that could ruin it for everybody else and could even bring the session to a close. So let's keep a very close eye as Carlos Sainz comes down the steep hill into Eau Rouge, keeps it buried as he goes through that Radion, up the right hander, up the hill and back onto that long, fast, high-speed Kemmel Straight.
The sun well and truly out on the Kemmel Straight. DRS, the rear wing flap is open and then it slams shut, under braking for Carlos Sainz, who finds himself 2/10 up in the first sector, but Charles Leclerc going quicker at the moment. Lost a bit of time though to Leclerc compared to Sainz in the latter of sector 1 and the mini sectors, but it's now Oscar Piastri in the McLaren who's finding even more time than the Ferrari, so let's see how this all plays out.
I'm not sure if the Ferrari there of Carlos Sainz didn't step all four wheels off the track. It looks incredibly close. They'll have very close eyes on it in race control, but that could be something to bear in mind as well.
Could Ferrari be looking at a front row lockout potentially? Their last one was back in Monaco in 2022. It's been a while. Ferrari could do with some good news, but it is so tight, so competitive. It'll be a long shot, but Sainz and Leclerc going well, but Piastri in the McLaren is finding even more time. Stroll crosses the line first. The best he can do in his Aston Martin will be 6th. Let's see how long he can hold on for that. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc, crosses the line, finds more time, almost a second to stay fastest. A 1:46.9. What has his teammate got? Carlos Sainz currently in 3rd. Can he pip his teammate to the line? No, he can't. Sainz is 2nd. It's currently a front row lockout for Ferrari, but what does Oscar Piastri say to that? It's 3rd for the Aussie in the McLaren. His teammate Lando Norris slots in behind him. Piastri out-qualifies Lando Norris, 3rd and 4th for the two McLarens. Alonso crossed the line, he slots into 5th. That's pushed Stroll down into 7th. What has Max Verstappen got? He takes pole position, Max Verstappen, by 0.8 of a second to Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes rockets up into 3rd, make that 4th because Sergio Perez comes into 3rd. George Russell, disappointment, could only do 8th fastest. It will be Max Verstappen who takes the fastest lap time, but with a 5-place grid penalty, it will be Charles Leclerc who will take pole position and will start Sunday's Grand Prix from the front row alongside Sergio Perez.
Yeah, much better from Sergio Perez. That penalty for Verstappen will put him on the front row alongside Leclerc, and that's one of the best starting grid positions he's had for a long time, and will do no end of good for his confidence. Hamilton up in P4, starting the 2nd row, another solid lap from him. Disappointing from his teammate, and both McLarens, I had higher hopes for both of them.
You know what? I really thought Piastri was going to get pole.
Me too.
It just sounds good as well, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah.
But not to be for this weekend at least. But I feel like it was all teed up to be quite at a crescendo. It didn't quite happen. Here's Verstappen.
Well, at least we had a good Q3. And sorry to be for being so on the rant.
Slowly getting used to it, Max.
Only just. Brilliant there from Max Verstappen. Cool, calm and collected, sounding happy and positive by over 0.8 of a second as well. Max Verstappen setting that fastest lap.
Do you know what I said earlier? I've heard loads of those kind of feisty conversations between driver and engineer. I'm not sure I've ever heard a driver apologise for it afterwards. So well done, Max Verstappen.
Well, Leclerc then will start Sunday's Grand Prix from pole position after the 5-place grid penalty that is applied to Max Verstappen, and Perez will be alongside him. But it was all set up to be quite an enthralling end, but in the end it didn't quite happen. But we still got to see 10 Formula One cars absolutely ring it around this fantastic, challenging, tricky, fast, technical circuit in changing conditions. We started off on the intermediate tyre, it got wetter and wetter.
Yeah, this is the best of Formula One. This is what Formula One should always be about. And you can't create it. You can't engineer the weather to be what you want. It's one of those things that just happens and throws a grenade into a race weekend, which can really spice it up. And look, I loved that session. I loved the way it played out. Yes, we got Verstappen on pole, which has been a familiar sight for a long time now, but that's because he did a wonderful job. In the moment, he had the same difficult conditions, and I know he's got a wonderful car, but he didn't do it in the second session. In the third session, he got everything right at the end of the tyres, the timer ran down, and he deserves to be on pole. For everybody else, they all did a great job. Everybody was going quicker. It was about timing, it was about bravery, it was about risk, and the ones who did best in that, and Charles Leclerc, who will start the race from pole position, you've got to say, pulled it out the bag today.
He absolutely did. It will be Charles Leclerc's 20th pole position of his career. He ties with Valtteri Bottas. And unfortunately, though, the record is he ties Bottas for most poles without winning a championship. So we'll forget that last bit. 20th career pole for Charles Leclerc, who celebrates, waves to the fans. Sergio Perez was, well, up there, finishing third on the road in that qualifying session. Should start alongside Charles Leclerc and a good run down into turn one. Perez could be on here for the win, but you just imagine that Verstappen will be able to carve his way through the field come Sunday. The weather is still here and there. We're not sure what it's going to bring, but if it's anything like today, it's going to be enthralling.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this is why Red Bull chose to take that extra gearbox that resulted in the 5-place grid penalty for Max. They took it here because they know they've got a quick car. Max has delivered on his part of the bargain. He's delivered the fastest lap, which means he's minimised the deficit or the impact of that penalty. So he'll start the race from 6th. He can find his way to the front from there on a circuit like this that's got lots of overtaking opportunities, really suits the high-speed nature of the car, and he'll have his teammate at some point to try and find his way past if he's going to take the win, and that, I think, is perhaps going to be one of the interesting things come Sunday afternoon. How hard is Sergio Perez going to fight Max if he is indeed on his way to the front?
Well, we can hear from our top three, starting with Sergio Perez, talking to Tom Christensen.
Brilliant qualifying. Checo Perez again in top 3. Theoretically, you will start P2 on Sunday. Tell us through it.
Yeah, very tricky qualifying out there. And a bit of allergy. But it was very tricky, you know. It started on the Inter. Conditions were very tricky initially. We thought that it was going to get a lot drier, a lot quicker. But it took a long time, and even there, at the end in Q3 it was quite tricky. A few places like turns 8, 9, very tricky, but it's a good result. It's a bit of a shame I didn't get Charles there, but I think in these conditions it was good that we had a good one.
We loved it, and we look forward to see you challenging from the front row on Sunday. Well done, Checo Perez.
Thank you.
Charles, it was a fantastic qualifying for all of us watching, and now P2, which will be pole on Sunday.
Yeah, not a bad qualifying for us, especially in those conditions. It's always tricky to put everything together. I put a lot of work in those conditions, as I wasn't really comfortable a few races ago, and it seems to pay off. We went a bit too early for that last run. Pole was definitely not for us today, and Max was too quick, but we could have been a bit closer. Having said that, we have a great starting position for Sunday, and yeah, let's see how it goes. We
really see, and there's a lot of great images in the background. I mean, you were You were pushing, you could see you really dancing with the car, trying to extract the most, particularly Q2, where everyone just improved during the last seconds.
Yeah,
How was it in the car?
It was really tricky. I had Kevin also that went in the wall and then continued in front of me. So I didn't put a lap in early, and then you've got all the pressure on that last lap that you need to put. And in those conditions, it wasn't easy. But at the end, everything went well. So yeah, happy. Having said that, there's still quite a bit of work to do in order to catch the Red Bulls.
Well done. You might have a wet day tomorrow as well. So all the best.
I hope so.
Well done, Charles.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the pole man, the dominator, the world champion. What a lap you put in the end. And you were nearly out during Q2. It was really close at that point.
Yeah.
How did you see it all?
Yeah, it was very tight. Of course, the conditions, they are very tricky. The track was really drying quickly, and yeah, my final lap, I just didn't have that confidence in Q2 to push more, and I was very lucky to be in P10. But then, yeah, of course, in Q3, you have 2 tyre sets. You know that you can push a little bit more, you can risk a little bit more, and that's what we did on that final lap. And yeah, to be on pole again, I mean, I know that I have to drop back on Sunday with the penalty I have, but it was the best I could do today.
And where was it, where the car really came alive? You were purple sector, all 3 sectors on your last flying lap. Just pushing at the limit or over the limit, or just like normal?
I guess sector 2 was still a bit damp, so there was only like really one dry line, or in some corners you had to do a bit of an alternative line to normal in the dry. And it was all about just feeling confident and basically risking everything in that final run to get more lap time. And yeah, we know that the car was quick, and I think even with these tricky conditions today, luckily we could show that again.
Yeah, looks like we have to find some rain tires for tomorrow, but for the Grand Prix on Sunday, you have the 5 grid penalties due to the gearbox. How do you foresee the weekend?
I mean, last year I had more penalties and we could still win the race, so that's still the target on Sunday. But yeah, let's first see also tomorrow what the weather will do and what kind of racing we will have.
And it feels a bit like the home circuit, doesn't it?
Of course. I mean, I've been here many times. I grew up from here, not even that far, so it's definitely like a second home race for me. And also great, to see so many fans around here. It's been, I think, quite tough today with the rain, but everyone just stuck in. And yeah, that's great to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done to the crowd. Well done, Max. All the best.
Well, great to hear from our top 3 there, speaking to Danish sports car Le Mans legend Tom Christensen. And although, well, fastest on the road for Max Verstappen by over 0.8 of a second, a mighty lap from the Dutchman with a 5-place grid penalty. He will fall down the grid, and it will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari who will start Sunday's Grand Prix from pole position in front of Sergio Perez. They will share the front row for lights out on Sunday. That just about does it, though, for qualifying here in Belgium on the Friday. My thanks to Mark Priestley. I've been Harry Benjamin. Do listen out on the BBC Sounds app and wherever you get your podcast for the Checkered Flag post-qualifying review and preview of the rest of the weekend, which will be out a little later today. And Saturday, the sprint shootout. Do join us on the BBC Sport website and app from 11 o'clock in the morning, and the sprint race from 3:30 in the afternoon on BBC Radio 5 Live. But all that's left to say is this is an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.